Welcome back to another video. This is going to be a spicy video. I'm going to make some points that are irrefutable, but I'm sure because it is YouTube, somebody in the comment section will go crazy listening to this and thinking I'm attacking the sovereignty of PlayStation somehow, or that I'm not a fan of their games and their systems. But I want to draw a parallel here that I think a lot of people either ignore because it's an inconvenient truth, or they just don't realize. And Metal Gear Solid here, Metal Gear Solid 5, I think demonstrates my point flawlessly, because this game was the 5th game in the Metal Gear series and came out on the PlayStation and the Xbox, but it did much better on the PlayStation. In fact, it sold incredibly well on the PlayStation, pushed people to buy a PlayStation. Why is that? Why did that happen? This was a multi-platform game, so why did people buy PlayStations for Metal Gear Solid 5? Well, it's because Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, and Metal Gear Solid 4 were exclusive, essentially, to the PlayStation. Now, Metal Gear Solid 2's subsistence eventually came to the original Xbox. Metal Gear Solid 3, 4 never did. But, essentially, what Sony did with Metal Gear Solid, and with a lot of other third-party games, is buy mindshare. They didn't buy the studio or the publisher. They didn't lock down these games forever, but what they did do is they made sure to lock down the idea that these games were PlayStation games. Whether or not there was a deal in place to do that, whether or not there's a relationship between certain studios and Sony, it happened. And I feel like if you're buying mindshare for a limited amount of time, so that in the future there's an unlimited amount of mindshare for your platform when it comes to third-party games, then I see a parallel there between what Microsoft is doing and essentially buying mindshare forever by buying these developers and publishers. Take a look at this picture. I saw it on social media as a reason in 2003 to own a PlayStation 2. I want you to pay attention to how many third-party games there are and think back to when you own a PlayStation 2. I owned a PlayStation 2. The majority of these games simply skewed towards PlayStation. Most people believe that these were exclusive games. These were Sony first-party games, or at the very least, this was a Sony game. This is a reason to own the PlayStation, and throughout the years, that mindshare, that limited amount of time that they purchased, became a unlimited amount of mindshare, because most people don't know what a first-party developer is, or a second-party, or a third-party. They just know Grand Theft Auto, PlayStation. They know Devil May Cry, PlayStation. So that is the idea behind buying mindshare. Now you can say, well, they created a platform where these developers could be successful and do their best work. That's not the point of this video. What I'm saying here is they ensured that everyone thought of PlayStation, even when it wasn't their work, it wasn't their game, it wasn't first party. Putting aside what's best for the industry, or who does a better job, or who would take care of the content better, that isn't the point here. Put that aside to understand the point I'm trying to make. Take a look at what Microsoft is doing. They are buying developers and publishers who have made games over the years. Some of those games, Sony spent a considerable amount of time and money to buy that limited mindshare, so that over time it became an unlimited mindshare. People thought of those games as PlayStation games, even though they were third-party games. So what Microsoft is doing is essentially the same, except they're doing it for eternity. They're buying that mindshare that used to exist either for PlayStation or just for the entirety of the industry, and they're saying now this mindshare is ours. Even if we allow those games on other platforms, you're going to think Xbox when you think of these games, and we're going to make sure that we have something exclusive to offer people who have an Xbox or people who play on PC through Game Pass. We're going to ensure that the mindshare is now ours. So, of course, Sony is upset, but some of the reasons that they're upset skew back to what I'm talking about. they've spent considerable amount of money over the years to make sure that third-party games speak PlayStation, even though they're not creating them. And now some of those games, again, I'm going to reiterate this point, some of those games that Microsoft is now buying used to skew PlayStation. People bought PlayStations for those games, and now they're taking that mindshare away. They're taking that limited mindshare from the PlayStation 1 era that translated to the PlayStation 2 that became an unlimited mindshare, carrying forward all the way to today with PlayStation 5. They're taking that and they're making it theirs. It's two sides to the same coin. Putting aside the argument whether or not Microsoft can actually create something good, whether or not Microsoft is trying to destroy the industry, putting all of that aside, just looking at the specifics of what was done PlayStation-wise, what was done Xbox-wise, these are essentially the same thing. Now, here's where I think people either forget about the point that I just made or ignore it, and that is Microsoft themselves have not done anything great in this industry. They certainly haven't created anything great, and that is where this trepidation comes in when it comes to them just buying up everything that's already been created. And I understand that, but it doesn't negate the points that I just made. We're going to move on from those points now because they're irrefutable. You talk about acquisitions and tons of talent and new games coming. Take a look at Rare. Microsoft purchased Rare. What has Rare done since the purchase? You would expect at least something better than Sea of Thieves, or at least something more than Sea of Thieves, and you only got one game out of Rare. How in the world are you going to get games out of 40 gazillion studios? How are you going to manage all of this when you can't even manage a Redfall release? That I understand. This critique of buying things and then turning them into just garbage, I understand that fear because you have a track record of that happening. Again, let's point to Redfall. How in the world can you not manage a Redfall release, the first brand new IP underneath of Game Pass, but somehow tons more studios are going to be able to create, develop, and release complete, competent games? That I understand, and that makes sense. And the biggest kicker of all is everything I said PlayStation did since its inception, buying mindshare for a limited amount of time that then springboards into an infinite amount of mindshare. And by the way, buying that exclusivity, that third-party exclusivity, gives you time to create really good first-party games if you have a plan for that. And of course, we know now that Sony and PlayStation did have that plan. But Microsoft used to do the exact same thing, and they were damn good at it. Call of Duty map packs pushed the Xbox 360 to the stratosphere. They knew that they could buy certain things to give them that mindshare, and it worked. They bought Tomb Raider for an entire year. Of course, they knew that this worked, but Microsoft now somehow doesn't care about selling consoles. Why? And this is where this fear and this anger comes in when it comes to buying all of these studios. Put aside what I said about PlayStation essentially doing the same thing with mindshare. This is why people forget my point or ignore it, because Microsoft did these things and decided we're not happy. We want to own everything. We want to get rid of consoles. Consoles aren't important. We created a subscription service. And by the way, it's for everyone. We want everyone to come and play in the playground. However, every single person funneling into this playground has to pass through this dome that says Windows. It's not really about everybody. It's about you. It's about control. That's where this fear and trepidation come in, and that's why I think a lot of people forget about the points that I made about PlayStation and its inception and what they did being really similar to Microsoft buying mindshare forever. When you put that aside and you start talking about the history of what Microsoft has done in the console space, that's where things get incredibly shaky. But what can dissuade all of these fears for me, maybe even you talking about me? What could put my mind at ease? Well, how about competent games that release? Starfield is the next one after Redfall. The game better be complete and better be good. How about Clockwork Revolution? Looked really good. Want that to release and want that to be good. Speaking of Rare, what is going on with Everwild? Can Rare create any video games other than a perpetual wave motion gun of games as a service Sea of Thieves? That will dissuade a lot of fears for a lot of people. However, Microsoft simply seems to not be able to get it done. So we're gonna have to wait to see if they can. And if they can't, if they continue to just release mediocre games that are unfinished, that don't really rise to any levels in the industry, that aren't sitting next to their peers when it comes to creativity, then I don't know what to tell you other than being a positive Xbox gamer is good for your YouTube channel. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. Think about liking and subscribing to this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.